So we have a very, very special guest with us now. She's probably the most important movie teenager of 2018. She's an instant horror icon. The last time you'd have seen her face on the screen, it was lying by the side of the road, engulfed in ants. She's playing Charlie in this year's scariest film, Hereditary. We're joined by Milly Shapiro. Hey Milly, how you doing?
Good, how are you?
I'm very good indeed. You're over in New York, right?
Yeah, I am.
Now, I watched the trailer to this film about 6 months ago in the cinema with my wife, and I honestly couldn't sleep after watching the trailer. I brought myself to watch it, and it genuinely is one of the scariest films I've ever seen. Now, you play the character of Charlie, who's a really unique character, right? And she goes through quite a lot of traumatic stuff during the course of this film. What was it like preparing for that role?
It was a lot of fun, and I personally love horror. I don't know why I used to despise it, but then I was like tricking myself to if I watched enough of it, I'd become desensitized, and I just grew to love it. And so when I got the audition, I was very excited because it was my first audition for a horror movie. And I read the script like 3 times before I even went in. And I just fell in love with the character of Charlie because she is so different than anything I've ever done before. And she's also very complicated. And getting to step into that type of character that isn't just one layer is really fun because you have to figure out how they think, what their physicality is. And it was a lot to wrap my head around at first, but I had a lot of fun doing so. And with my acting teacher, we came up with an inner and an outer animal for Charlie, which is something that I tend to do for a lot of characters because it makes physicality and thought process a little easier to understand. And for Charlie, the outer animal was a turtle and the inner animal was a snake. And it just kind of helps you develop personality traits and physicality traits. And then I also met with Ari once I had gotten the part, and we talked about Charlie and how she thought and what exactly the thing going on with Payman was. And it was a lot of fun, but very complicated.
Yeah, you often hear that actually some of the most fun and enjoyable shoots are on a horror set where you'd expect them to be really traumatic and quite frightening. But I hear a lot of actors say they love doing horror films.
Mm-hmm.
So with this character, obviously she goes through some really traumatic stuff, right? So there's the scene where she's basically having a anaphylactic shock and a reaction to the peanuts, and you play that so well. How did you prepare for that particular scene? Because you're so convincing.
Thank you. Well, I think part of it was because I've actually had an anaphylactic allergic reaction before.
Oh, right.
So I had some personal experience with that because I am highly allergic to red ants. So I kind of had that to bring to the part. So I had kind of experienced it, which I thought was very cool. I also did some research online and looked up people having anaphylactic reactions, and then read a bit about what happens to your body when that's happening to you. And then there was also all the makeup, which made it really real in the moment for the character. And it just brought everything together. And everyone was so kind. And it was so much fun to film because it is something that's harder to do. So you're challenging yourself. And then when you feel like you did a good job, you feel so proud. And I just really had a blast doing that.
So obviously I'm trying my best not to patronise you because the way you act in terms of, your ability, you act way beyond your years, but you're still a teenage girl, right? You're 16 years old. So
Yeah.
In terms of the film itself, how did your parents react to the outcome of the film? Did they let you watch it, or were you allowed to, were they screening it from you?
No, my parents were fine with me watching it and stuff because when I first auditioned, I was 14 and when we were done filming, I turned 15 in the next month, and I read the script a bunch of times, and I feel like as an actor, you have a sense of what's real and what's not real, and it's just art, and I feel like that's the best way to describe it, and I feel like a lot of the times, if a child's too young for something, they won't understand it, and it won't bother them.
Mm.
And for me, my parents were fine with me watching it, and everyone I knew, when I told them about the part and the role, when they saw the movie, they're like, yeah, that's perfect for you. You've always said you wanted to do that. And I was like, yep. It was very fun because I've always said that I wanted to die in a horror movie and be someone who's creepy. So I got all of that in one go, in my first film, and I was very excited.
Yeah, you definitely did those two things. I mean, the character is really, really creepy. I won't give away the end, obviously, for any listeners out there, but she's a very, very interesting character, and obviously one of her sort of unique traits is that clicking and the clucking that she does quite a lot. Was that something that was written into the script, or was that something that you ad libbed?
It was written in the script, and me and Ari, we had like a 30-minute meeting, like discussing like why she does it and what the exact sound is. And it's kind of like a coping mechanism for her when the world's too overwhelming. So she recludes into herself and makes that noise as like a comfort thing.
Mm.
And I feel like it translated really well on film. And it's absolutely brilliant, in my opinion, to use that, because you can get across so many things. And there's so many parts of the movie where you think you hear it and you get very freaked out and startled. And I think it was a perfect way of getting that across. And figuring out the exact sound for it took like a fair amount of time, which is kind of like ridiculous sounding because it's such a simple sound. But when you think about how many different ways there are to make that sound, and it makes it more complicated than like how long the sound is. And is it the same every time or is it different? But once we got it, I feel like it got a bunch of stuff across and really added to the creepy elements of the character.
Yeah, definitely. And it was used as a really good mechanism to frighten you as well, right? So, typically in horror films, you have those sort of jumpy moments, but that click sound really got to the sort of soul of you. It was really unsettling and unnerving. So you mentioned that you've become a big horror fan over the years. Is there any particular horror movies you love?
I really like The Shining and The Exorcist, and I think it's really funny that I like those because the first horror movie I ever watched, I didn't actually watch it. Me and my dad and my sister were watching it, and I watched the beginning parts of it, and then I left because I was scared. And then I kept peeking out at all the scary parts, and it was Pet Sematary, which is a very similar and like a slow burn style movie. And I've been freaked out about that specific movie ever since, and still haven't watched it to this day. But then when I was like 10, later down the line, I was like, I'm not going to be scared of stuff anymore, so I'm going to watch like a bunch of scary movies. And so I did with my sister, who's never been scared of anything. And then I slowly grew to love the horror genre and all things creepy and disturbing. And I think what really drew me to it as I got older was how it shows how humans develop and how humans like react to like situations where there is like a strong sense of death and like danger. And it's really interesting because you really see how like the human psyche reacts in that way. There's also a big use of stereotypes in typical horror, where they use certain stereotypes to get across certain reactions from the audiences. And it's really interesting to think about. And I feel like that's what developed my love of horror. And then when I read Hereditary, it was like nothing I'd ever heard of before or seen. And I really loved it because it doesn't rely on jump scares. It relies more on psychological, and there isn't really like stereotypical characters or like archetypes that are generally used in horror. So reading that, I really could just picture every image in my mind, and it was like nothing I'd ever seen before, and I really loved it. And when I read it, I was like, I have to be in this. Like, I'll be so upset if I don't get this. And I did. So I'm very lucky about that.
So it's Oscar season around the corner, right? And obviously, not a lot of horror films often win Oscars, but Hereditary is unique because it crosses the lines between being a horror film to a psychological thriller. Do you think you're going to get an Oscar nod?
I would be very excited if I did. I don't really know. I feel like if it happens, I'll be very excited. If it doesn't, it doesn't, and it's my first film. So I'm still really happy about the outcome either way. But I feel like Tony should get nominated. Alex should get nominated. All the other actors, Gabe, and the film should definitely get nominated for directing or writing. It was very amazing in both those aspects. So I feel like the film should get nominated for something because it is so amazing. But if I don't get personally nominated, I don't really care because I've like grown like so in love with like the story and the work that it's become, that I really just want it to get some recognition in some way because everyone's put their heart and soul into this movie, and it's really just an amazing project.
Yeah, I mean, something that I don't even think about, but I do definitely think that the film itself is Oscar worthy, and it would be amazing if you won as well. There'd definitely be some records broken there, right? They must be. That would be the youngest Oscar win, surely, if you if you were to take that home with you.
I don't know. I would be very excited. It'd be very cool.
I saw on your Instagram that you're a massive anime fan.
Oh yes,
What sort of
huge.
what sort of stuff are you digging on at the moment?
Um, I really like some of the darker stuff, like the original Tokyo Ghoul series and Danganronpa, which was originally a game, but then they later made an anime from. But I also like more of the typical coming of age stories, like Princess Jellyfish and Orange, and I've also seen every episode of Fairy Tale, which is a large thing to say because there's almost 300 episodes. And yeah, I just really like the way anime tells stories, and it also like teaches you about Japanese culture, and you get all these different characters, and I really like it because you're watching art, and all of the artists that work on it are so talented, and I just really like it.
Yeah, I'm actually a fan as well. I like some of the earlier manga stuff. I don't know if you've seen like Akira or Ninja Scroll or Ghost in the Shell, that sort of stuff. That stuff
I've
is
heard of
really
it,
good.
yeah.
Definitely get involved in that. So obviously, since Hereditary come out, you've become an instant horror icon. How's that been dealing with that? Because I'm sure more people recognise you in the street now. You're probably getting offered a lot more roles than you were offered before.
Yeah, it's really cool. I'm definitely getting a lot more auditions for bigger parts and stuff. And I'm trying to stay away from horror because you don't want to be typecast because it's very easy to get stuck into that repetition. And I have been getting recognized, which is really cool because I'll just be walking down the street and people will be like, "Hey, are you that girl from that movie?" And I'll be like, "Yeah, I am." They're like, "Good job." I'm like, "Thank you." And then sometimes people, like this one time I was at the airport and someone said, "You look like that girl from that movie." And I was like, "Yeah, I do." And they walked away, and then they came back and they're like, "Are you?" I'm like, "Yeah, I am." And they're like, "Oh, good job." I'm like, "Thank you."
Is it
I think
strange
it's
though?
fun.
Is it weird, sort of like overnight becoming really recognisable? It must be quite strange.
It is strange in a way, but you're also getting recognition for your work. So there is that aspect of it. And all of the reactions I've had from people are really cool, and it's from people that really loved the movie. And so getting to meet those people and talk about the film is really cool.
So what does the future hold for Milly Shapiro then? What's the next role? What's the next project?
Right now I'm just auditioning, hoping for the next job. I've gotten really close on some things, and I'm hoping for something that's really fun and really challenging and like nothing else I've done before.
Do you have a dream role? Is there one role from fiction that you'd absolutely love to play?
I don't know. It's hard to pick one thing. I feel like there isn't anything that specific. If it was in theater, probably like Fontaine in Les Mis or Eponine or something like that. That's very dramatic because I love doing very dramatic theater pieces. And for film, just anything. Mostly creating new characters is something that I like to do. Doing things that no one's ever done before, because then you're creating a person, and I think that's a lot of fun. And so I'm gonna get something really cool, and it'll be great, and it'll be fun.
Well, Milly, it's been a real pleasure having you on. You've been a fantastic guest. I genuinely hope you get the recognition you get from the Academy for your role in this film. And I hope the film goes on to win lots of Oscars because it's very, very worthy. So thank you very much indeed for joining us, and thanks for giving up your time. So much for joining us.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.